some of you will have seen the work of Bridget Riley before. So this happened to just be on my desk. It's something I'm interested in. It's kind of haptic, sensual kind of feeling that the work creates, that you're sort of looking into the image sort of, and the image becomes space. So that's something that's always going on in my mind when I'm making my work. So yeah, this kind of made me laugh slightly. I was like, of course, this is a Bridget Riley reference. Now for the next stage of this development, I want to sort of continue to think about this pattern in form. Yeah, so I've got these two very distinct sides of the paper. So actually I think probably what would make sense is if I kind of cut it down the middle, but I think going across this way and then possibly breaking it down further will make most sense of the potential that I can find within the image. So my ruler and craft knife, making sure I'm on the cutting board, of course. Now the thing that's nice about this sheet is the size of it. So one of the things that we need to consider when we're thinking about form is the scale of your print. So automatically by cutting this, I'm going to be making it a lot smaller, and that's going to change the dynamic of the print. So it's going to be much bigger. So I kind of would like to kind of keep a strip of this really. So perhaps before we start cutting down any further, I'm going to cut along, I think here, with just the scissors. So I've got this very dense set of dots to play with. Okay, so I'll just remove that for a moment. These here. So just really basically we can see this length can be manipulated quite easily. So one of the things that I want to kind of, looking back here to this Bridget Riley image, is thinking about this kind of swirl. So I just want to curl up this long strip and see if that does anything interesting to my dots. It might not. It might actually just kind of end up with a helix kind of shape and lots of white space. So there is quite a lot of white space here, isn't there? So there's the potential for printing on the other side of this and then sort of seeing how that forms a more interesting sculptural form when we have less white space. So, but I think here there is something potentially happening. So especially when we kind of consider the shadow. So just for the moment, what I'm going to do is just tape that into position. So just with some masking tape, I'm just going to leave my scissors there. Oh no, it didn't work. So all I'm doing here really is showing you a range of ways to kind of consider your work. Some of these might not work for you, and that's fine. It isn't a case of you having to explore all of them. It's just a case of kind of trying and sort of seeing some maybe alternative potential within your work. So I can't exactly remember how that was meant to go, but perhaps we'll just tape those together there for the moment and then have a look and see what's happened to our line of dots. So I think I really would want to print on the back of that to make sure that there was something more dynamic happening. But from various locations, there is potential there. Okay. So now if we take this strip and let's cut it down the middle. Yeah. Just want to take a section of it out. I think what works really nicely with this style of print is that then there's a self-contained section, so we can still see the rhythm of the pattern across the surface. So what do we want to do with this? So if we imagine, again, we're going to kind of take this more sculptural approach, I feel that we do know that print on the back would be more successful, but actually by just, I'm going to cut into this line quite near the surface and kind of start to bring it up. You know, actually already we can kind of see that this print in there, and if we were to turn it around, kind of looking at it from a different direction, there's more potential with having the print at the base. So before we kind of stick anything down, let's take up a section lower down. Now obviously if we were doing this in cloth, I would be with the sewing machine, and I would have backed my cloth with Vilene to make it more permanent, more stable, and therefore kind of giving it a different feeling. But paper is a really useful way of testing ideas because we don't have to spend time backing things and or stitching, because we can just use tape. So we kind of have these very clear sort of linear channels there, and perhaps that's not what we're looking for. So I'm just double-sided some masking tape. I'm just going to stick these things together, and then that's leaning quite nicely actually, and it's quite nice that we're not having to flatten it entirely. But if I want a more dynamic bend, then I'm going to have to. So thinking about how these overplace each other, that dot could be interesting there, and then it's almost like replicating the dot on the surface. So we could spend a bit more time kind of deciding where these dots go, so that you have something that doesn't have this kind of horrible cut edge. But just for the moment, we're just going to have a look here. So this is starting to now bend, which is really quite interesting. So do we have enough space to kind of bring this around? I think we do. Now we're still working on a very flat surface, which is quite different from the first strip sculpture that we created. But this is starting to have a life of its own, and we can see that actually from certain angles the fact that we don't have print on the back is less of an issue, unless we're kind of looking in this area here. So this kind of is bringing the surface up, as I've said, and we might want to kind of play with that. So by bringing this around, or we might want to leave it, but we could try. Just the bending will lift it again. So there we are, a tiny little maquette of a possibility there. So this could be flat on a surface, it could be on a wall, or it could be hanging. And again, paper, just as the example, definitely can be made from cloth, but would need to be treated slightly differently. We bring these two back together, you know, do they work as a team? Does this become more interesting? If we lay this on top, potentially. These could be quite interesting forms for your conceptual headgear as well, because printed paper, printed cloth can be easily kind of manipulated together and build in form. Yeah? Okay. Thank you for listening.